coders, let's try that again. That was embarrassing. Essentially what happened was the monitor setting on my headphones was not set correctly. And I was hearing myself twice in an echo loop. And it wasn't actually being output to the internet. So I do apologize. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's well. Hello, coders. Today we're going to be talking about Flutter 2. We're going to be talking about Deno, and we're going to be talking about Repl, as well as some things to do with howtocodewell.net and other bits and pieces that I've been doing recently. So this is episode, I do apologize for being a little bit out of sorts. We had a bit of a problem with the audio stuff earlier. But I hope everybody can hear now. This is episode 91, and it is Thursday the 4th of March. Wow, we're moving into, we're staring right into the face of the second quarter of the year. That is pretty bonkers. And let's do a quick roundup of howtocodewell.net to start off with. So I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago that I've split How to Code Well up, the technical roadmap, into quarters, the quarters of the year. So we are very close to finishing the first quarter. It's going to finish at the end of March, and then we've got April, June, July, and April, May, June. Skip a month. And what I want to do in this quarter is to deal with the social sign-on. So this is where you can log in using a social account. I'm choosing to use GitHub at the moment, but I might include others later on. And I'm pretty much there with that, which is really good. So I'm pretty much done on that. Another thing we did in this quarter, which wasn't actually scoped, was to do with moving from Gatsby to a plain old Symfony site. So we had an API before, and it was a Symfony API. There was a CMS behind it, and also the front end was Gatsby static site. And I spent a good, portion of time bringing it back into Symfony. So removing the API, and actually, it's the best thing I've done. One of the best technical things I've done. I'm finding that developing this in the evenings is a bit of a dream now, because I can, I don't have a lot of time in the evenings to do the work, and I can do it far quicker because everything is in Symfony. Everything's running on PHP. That's opened up some interesting challenges with and decisions for things like hosting, because no longer is the front end on AWS Amplify. It means I can open up to other things, other sort of VPS solutions as well. So I'm kind of looking at other things too now. So using things like Terraform and Ansible to spin up VPSs and whatnot. Now the move from Gatsby to Symfony was not planned at all in this technical roadmap. So I'm kind of doing this along the side lines, and it will probably bleed into the second quarter as well. I want to get the beta site replaced. So beta.howtocodewell.net, if you're a private beta user, then I would like to have that site replaced with the PHP site pretty soon, probably by the end of March. We'll get to that point. And then after that, I'll look at replacing production. So slowly coming off of AWS. One of the reasons why I want to move away from AWS is because it's costing a lot of money, and the costs are very difficult to try and nail down, because there's various different things that happen in the background of howtocodewell.net that I didn't realize would cost as much as they are. And I quite like the idea of having just a fixed cost that you pay per month, that you know where you stand, that kind of stuff. Plus, at the moment, the cost of AWS kind of justifies the cost of a decent set of VPSs at the moment. So that's something I'm considering doing. But anyway, that's all that. So we're on track, essentially. That's basically what I wanted to say. We're on track. Excellent. Thank you, Bryce, for joining. Voice and audio is finally working. Awesome. There was a big difference between the waiting music volume and the microphone volume. Oh, okay. Right. I will. What I'll do is I'll play this back, and I will investigate that. We haven't had the intro for a while, so we will. I'll try and work that through. Try and work that one out. So that's where I am with How to Code Well. And the next sprint is, well, I say the next quarter. These are big sprints. The next quarter will be focusing on different levels of accounts, so free accounts, premium accounts, that kind of thing. So, monthly accounts and yearly accounts, premium features on howtocodewell.net. So a lot of Stripe integration. So that's coming up in the stream. So that'll be quite an interesting thing to do live on Twitch that I do Tuesday mornings at 7 a.m. on Tuesday and Sundays at 14:30 GMT. So if you wanna pop on then and check out some PHP code, then please do so and say hi. But this brings me to an interesting point. The next piece of work is going to be around subscriptions. So when someone subscribes to be a particular user level and has particular features that a free user won't have. So, for instance, they'll be able to see premium video tutorials and video courses. They'll be able to access the premium code examples. That kind of thing. So there is a sort of a business model behind all of this that I would like to tease out in the next quarter. But I was reading through, as you do, I was reading through Hacker News earlier on today, and I discovered a post by someone who was talking about Repl. So Repl.it is is a way that you can write code in a Repl on their website, and you can share that code around. And there are different sort of services and tiers and a subscription plan, I suppose, I guess you can call it. And they've had a lot of backing recently, a lot of funding recently, which is all good to them. But this poster mentioned that they subscribed, they paid for an account, and they couldn't discover a way to cancel their account, which is a bit weird. So essentially, they paid for this account, but they ended up having to email customer services to get their account removed, terminated. Now, I haven't dug much into this at all, so I don't know whether this is true or the ins and outs of this. I read the post and I just thought, this is very weird. Why would someone have a website where they have this subscription set of tiers, or a way of purchasing access to a service, and not provide a way of removing that access? So it got me thinking about How to Code Well and the future of How to Code Well, where I want to push it, and the repercussions of bad decision making. So what I would like to do is probably, when I come up to building these things, I wouldn't mind doing a couple of podcasts where I'm just talking through the user journeys and seeing if there is any kind of holes that the audience can pull out and find. Because obviously this thing where Repl didn't allow people to cancel their subscriptions, that's a massive issue, and that has a reputational issue too. Now, I don't know the ins and outs, like I said, of the issue. They did say, apparently they said that they put out like this statement. Customer support mentioned that they were working on subscription cancellations. So it was a feature that wasn't actually in production, but they were working on it. So whether that means that they knew about it and they were working on it, I don't know. But why would you release a piece of kit that you can't remove? It's baffling. They also said that they recently upgraded their Stripe library. and their version, and they missed a part of the code which relied on old behavior, which is fair because that does happen, especially when you're working on legacy vintage code. If you go and update something to a newer version and your old code relied on an older version, then I can see where this slip up happens. This, it happens all the time. But because there is this sensitive part of, account and billing, it's you would think that there was some QA. You would think that there was some user journeys that were defined that said, or acceptance tests that tested this user flow, this important user flow. And it also shows that there was more emphasis on gaining money than canceling, which means that, which is what you would expect, I suppose. But it was just an interesting article I read, or this post this person mentioned on Hacker News, and it just got me thinking about the future of How to Code Well, because I don't want How to Code Well to be one of these case studies, of course. So I think what I'm going to do is, before each one of these big feature builds, I'm going to do a sort of an episode like this and just list out the user journeys, and if there's any holes, then hopefully they'll get picked out. But that's just it. I don't want to hate on Repl. It's a really good service. It's a really good service for sharing code and playing with various different things. Okay, so Flutter. This is an interesting one. So Flutter 2 is recently out. And I must admit, Flutter is one of those things that has passed me by. So, sorry, I'm just reading the comments. So Flutter 2 has recently passed me by, I suppose. One of those technologies that I kind of just sort of dismissed. It was kind of like, oh, so it's just a way of building another way of building mobile apps. So that's what meh, how you could just throw a stone and you've got another. There's another one, right? So I mean, I used to build mobile apps using things like Alloy.js, Titanium, Appcelerator. I've used PhoneGap. I've used, is it Xamarin, Xamarin, or whatever it's called. Have you played with that before? I've played with all sorts of various things to make a mobile app. I've made sites that look like mobile apps but are actually PWAs. And so when Flutter came out, I just kind of went meh, and actually my career moved more towards the software architecture in terms of the building websites and web systems rather than mobile applications or tablet applications. But what I didn't realize, and this is why it's, this is in hindsight after reading these articles on Flutter, and I'm just kind of my eyebrow started to raise. It's not just mobile applications. No. What I didn't realize, of course, was Flutter can do so much more. Flutter you can create apps using Flutter. You can create applications in the same sense that you could create, say, an Electron app. And Electron, as we all know, is huge. I mean, if you use Visual Studio Code, that is an Electron app. I believe, is it Discord, is an Electron app. And Flutter is Google's solution to Electron in that domain. So you wouldn't build a mobile app in Electron, but you would build a mobile app in Flutter, and you would also build a web app in Flutter. And the thing is, this is where it gets a bit of a gray area, because we're moving away from the web and into the desktop space, which is what Google has their eye on, in my opinion. Let's just list off some apps, some actual apps that aren't websites or mobile applications. So, for example, Google Pay, Nest Hub, Stadia, Family Link, Google Ads, Google Shopping, Google Analytics. I suppose they are websites, but they're apps. Cloud Search, Google Ad Mobile. They're all built on Flutter. So Google is paying a lot of, investing a lot of stuff into Flutter. They're basically what's the term? Dog fooding their own stuff in Flutter, and it's not just Google. I can never say this. The people behind Ubuntu, Canonical, I think that's the name. I can't say it very well. Canonical. They are building the Ubuntu installer in Flutter. So you can install an operating system using the same software that you could write a mobile app with. What? So that's absolutely bonkers. And in my opinion, this is because of they've got their sights set on things like the desktop space, as I mentioned. So things like Electron. Now, let's all put our tin hats on. Electron is made by GitHub. GitHub has been acquired by Microsoft. So you've got these two big companies now. You've got Google, you've got Microsoft, and they're all producing tools to build desktop applications. That's going to be a very interesting time ahead, I think. I think we won't see the ins and outs of this for years to come. Probably 3-4 years. But I do wonder which one is going to be on top. Now, for anyone new to Flutter, or anyone new to this industry, Flutter, I think, would be quite an attractive tool to learn. Flutter / Dart, obviously. Yeah. So I think, though, for myself, that train has already passed the station. So I mean, I'm suited for back-end development at the moment. I'm not concerned about. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I'm happy to stand on the sidelines and watch where this goes and see which one wins the desktop race, because essentially that is where it's going to go. It's not who wins the mobile application development space. In my opinion, it'll be who wins the desktop environment. That is the real winner. It'll be interesting to see where GitHub takes Electron. I think because of this, I'm sure we'll see different sort of different things from different companies doing different things better. So I'm interested. Flutter does seem to be like, if I was learning to code now, I would probably be very, very tempted to play with Flutter. There are, however, some downsides to Flutter. For instance, Flutter is very opinionated. If you want to build an app if you want to build a HTML app, then use Electron, because you're just building HTML that converts into a desktop app. But if you want to build something in Flutter, then there are certain things that you need to adhere to. The Google way of doing things. For example, material design, which I don't think I can't stand Material UI, to be fair. I'm not the biggest fan of Material UI, and for that reason, I would probably look for other alternatives. And for that reason, I'll probably find that Flutter is quite sort of, it's very opinionated. It's very difficult to do other things outside of Flutter, in my opinion. I must say I've never used Flutter, but just reading the documentation, it's like, you do it like this, you do it like that. Whereas with say, Electron, it's a little bit more open. But then, hey, it's using HTML and CSS, right? So, you can do whatever you want with it. Anyway, I don't want to get into, Pete hates Flutter, that kind of thing, because I must say, I don't really have a horse in this race. I've never used Flutter. I've used Electron before, and I really did like it. But I've never used Flutter or Dart. but I am very interested to see where this race for the desktop environment will take us, and it will drag the web with it, I feel, especially when you've got things like Ubuntu being installed using Flutter. That just opens up so many different possibilities. Anyway, so there's that one. The next one I wanted to talk about was Denno. And again, this is something that I probably can't pronounce very well. Is it Denno? Denno? I don't know. The alternative to it's another JavaScript package manager. 1.8 was recently released, and this has some really interesting features. One of which is GPU support. So I have a suspicion that they're trying to target Python developers to use Deno, and this is because of the GPU stuff. This is because of the intensity of the data scientists or the machine learning developers. The people who require a lot of resources, and when you've got an alternative as a JavaScript package manager that can have support for GPU, that is really, really awesome. And of course, it's not just a package manager. Of course, it's more than that. But the release also saw import maps as well as stable, following the environment. Following their enablement in Google's just released Chrome 89. Again, we're talking about Google here. So you can see how these cogs are turning between the companies, right? So the link between Denno and Chrome is that they both use the V8 JavaScript engine. Import maps allow simplified code for importing JavaScript modules. Other new features include support for downloading modules from servers that require authentication, stabilization of permission APIs for security web pages, and improved instrumentation support for analyzing performance. So this is actually quite a huge change. And the thing is, this tool hasn't been around for a while, to be fair, in the grand scheme of things. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where this goes in the future. I'm just going to bring up the article that I was reading earlier, because this is actually quite a recent thing. Oh, bear with me a minute. I am running on the on the wrong tab, but yes, it's GPU support. We're talking about hardware stuff in web development, which brings me to the next topic that I wouldn't mind talking about, and that is RAM. I'm still in this world of wondering whether or not to go Linux rather than Mac. Web developers on Macs, on Apple Macs, they are in a really weird position at the moment, because there is this M1 chip, and this M1 chip flies. It's brilliant, super fast, super quick. However, you can't purchase a laptop, an Apple laptop, a MacBook Pro or MacBook Air with M1 that has greater than 16 gigabytes of RAM, which kind of puts us in a bit of a predicament. If you want to have more than 16 gigabytes of RAM, you need to get an older version of the MacBook Pro, and then you can go up to 32 or 64. You can't have the M1 chip. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether it's something to do with the support that chipset has for the RAM that you can give it, or whether it's just a clever marketing tactic from Apple to reduce the allowed amount for the purchasable Macs, so they can still sell the older MacBook Pros for us developers who need all the RAM. So the only alternative, of course, for me, if I wanted to go for 32 gigs, would be Linux. So don't know whether I don't know whether anybody's plotted any kind of trend after M1 was launched for people who needed 32 gigs to go to Linux instead of waiting around. We also have to wait, of course, for Docker and other things to be fully supported by M1, which currently isn't at the moment. So it's not like I can just go out and buy an M1. I need Docker. So I don't really know at the moment what to do. I don't really know what to do because I am maxing out 16 gigabytes of RAM on a daily basis. I give about between 10 and 12 gigabytes of RAM for Docker alone. And I give Docker as well about, I think it's 2 or 4 cores. It depends on what I'm doing. I've got lots of cores in this MacBook Pro. But that doesn't leave a lot for the operating system. And when I'm doing some really intense operations, say, for example, recently I've been doing a lot of work with Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch is a bit of a resource hog, as everybody knows. And when I throw scripts at it, it starts to slow down. The whole laptop just turns into a heater. And you can hear the fans going on, which is something that the M1s don't have, right? They don't have fans, which is nice. It would be nice not to hear the laptop in pain. So yeah, no, I don't know really what I should do. I'm at the tipping point, I think. If I was to do anything more strenuous, like for example, I can't run a testing suite at the same time as I'm importing documents into Elasticsearch. I just can't do that. Or I can't run other Docker containers that do temporary actions, routines, whilst I'm doing the ES stuff, and I'm doing some interesting indexing and searching and all that jazz. And so I'm kind of stuck. I'm apt to the bottleneck, I suppose. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's been a couple of times where I've had to do things and leave it running overnight, which I don't really like doing, to be fair. Not on a laptop anyway. And the thing is, it needs to be a laptop. It can't be a desktop. Because one day we will get out of COVID, and one day I'll need to take it with me. So, so yes, I know I could get a super iMac, and put that, upgrade that to the hills. But yeah, so it's an interesting one. I do wonder whether Apple has done this because it knows that developers who do really intensive stuff need to have more than 16 gigs of RAM, and so they've cut this off, or whether it is simply just a hardware issue that you cannot run more than 16 gigs on an M1. I don't know. Maybe I have to wait until the M1X comes out, but I definitely need more than 32 gigs of RAM, which brings me back to this whole GPU thing. So this is the Deno. I'm not sure if I'm spelling this right. Deno 1.8. Again, I've let this pass me by. I know other developers who have used this, but not I. So here we go. I've got the article up finally. So the Denno project has released version 1.8, and it excludes it includes an experimental support for Web GPU API, enabling out-of-the-box GPU accelerated machine learning. Woohoo! Okay, so it's co-founded by obviously Node, by the creators of Node, right? And I think they've done this because they want to entice the Python developers in because of the GPU support, which is a really good move, to be fair. So for things like machine learning, sort of deep fakes, that kind of thing, or something that really takes a lot of intense stuff, data science, statistic crunching, data modeling, those kind of things. This would be really an attractive tool, I think, for people to use. I don't really know too much about Web GPU, to be fair. It is a API apparently for GPU programming. That makes sense. It's not a W3C standard though, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of this, but I do hope it becomes one soon, because that will allow others to take advantage of it. It's not a W3C standard, but it does have support from people like Google, Mozilla, and Apple, and it's in the development Chromium, Firefox, and Safari. The integration of Web GPU API into Denno has been no small task and required 15.5 thousand lines of code. Wow! According to the post, as well as guidance from the Web GPU team. I mean, I didn't even know that team existed, but fair enough. That's awesome. That's awesome. It has full support for international components for Unicode ICU, which is apparently the second most requested feature on the Deno repository. Deno promises to match the browser API for this, important for language localization. The release also saw import maps, as I mentioned, marked as stable in the Google Chrome's 89 release. Yeah. So, and then of course, as I mentioned, that you can include modules from servers that require authentication, stabilization of permission APIs for security web pages. A lot has gone involved in this release. Yeah, it's and I mentioned it was a package manager. It's a replacement for that was silly of me. Yeah, no, it's not. It's a little bit more than just that. Yeah, so Deno is one of these things that has passed me by. It's a bit like TypeScript. It's a bit like Flutter, as I mentioned before. These technologies, they're kind of like, I'm kind of reading about them after they've once they've got really big. Same with Rust as well. I did play with Rust a bit, but then I got sort of lost, and it wasn't really. I discovered that it wasn't anything that I actually needed to do to make money. So PHP was back. I fell back into the PHP train, which was perfectly fine and acceptable to me. But the thing is, I guess my barometer of whether or not this is a good thing to learn would be to have a look at the job boards and see if there are a trend in things like Flutter or Deno or as we know, TypeScript is getting more and more popular, every day. So, that would be a good thing to learn from the point of view of getting a job. But in terms of just learning to code, I think Flutter would be a nice thing to play with. It's when I read these things and I think about things in hindsight, I always think, what would I do if I was to start again? I think I would always boil it back down to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as kind of the first sort of set of programming areas to learn, especially for web development. But the things like at the point of moving to a different framework, I think Flutter would be quite an interesting thing to jump on board. Deno has progressed considerably since the release of version 1, but that was way back. Well, I say way back. That was only in May 2020, so that was about a year ago-ish, just under a year. The project has it's grown and grown and grown. I know that these aren't figures that you should really sort of justify and put any weight on, but for instance, there's 73,000 stars apparently on GitHub and 170,000 watches, whatever that means in terms of the popularity of the thing. Obviously, there's lots of people who are interested in it, yeah, another interesting thing to watch. What will I ever use it? I don't know. Who knows? It depends if a client requires it. This is something I didn't realize. It uses Rust. Huh. And exclusive use of the ECMAScript modules as opposed to the CommonJS modules still widely used in Node. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if Node will come back with any kind of, not a response. It's not like a to and fro like that, but I just wonder if they'll have any kind of, they'll change their roadmap, which kind of lines up a little bit more with this. The same with Electron. I wonder if the Electron roadmap will change to align a little bit more with, say Flutter. That'll be quite an interesting. It's quite an interesting space at the moment. And the really interesting thing about this is my day-to-day, I get paid to build web applications, web systems. And what we've been talking about today has mostly centered around things for building really data-heavy analytical systems, such as your GPU-required data science, machine learning stuff, as well as operating system installers using technology that you can use to write mobile applications. So not strictly web stuff in that sense, but using the technologies that you can certainly use for that. So lots of interesting overlap going on with this. But yeah, I just thought I would bring these back up. By the way, I'm reading from the register. I'll leave these links in the show notes as well if someone wants to have a look at the things I've found. It's been, it's interesting. Maybe I'll be doing a little bit more of this kind of, I guess, I don't want to say news thing. Just sort of talking about things that I'm interested in. Yeah. Hello, Wawa. Thank you for joining. Is there a chance for working with you or in your company? Excuse me. Obviously there is in terms of client work, definitely. But it'll be, yeah. Let me know what your thoughts are. Put them in Discord. So if you join Discord, howtocodewell.net/Discord. But at the moment, I must say I'm pretty much at capacity in terms of work, and the How to Code Well stuff. So I can't really do anything else because the howtocodewell.net website has taken up most of my evening hours as well as the weekends. Excuse me. Gosh, but I do hope everybody's doing well here. Bryce is saying, interesting that nowadays I trust Microsoft way more than I do Google. Never thought that would happen. I know, right? Yeah, I know. And this whole this whole thing going on with Apple and Facebook at the moment with privacy, that's going to change the web, I think, in ways that we can't yet understand or imagine. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But there's a lot of things going on with big companies that have a lot of influence on the web, and it'll just be interesting how they mold the web for their needs, and we need to adhere to that. I mean, one thing that will always stick out to me is that I spent many years learning ActionScript for Flash and building all sorts of Flash-based applications. And yes, I admit Flash was not the best thing in the world. It was only because I was taught Flash when I was at university. And I came out of university looking for Flash-based roles. And then, I ended up becoming a web developer, so it wasn't really doing a lot of Flash work, right? Hardly any at all, to be fair. And Flash just kind of like dithered in the wayside. But then Apple came along and just basically killed it. And you could quite rightly argue that that was the right thing to do. But it just shows how much influence these companies have on the web. So, but that's something that I will always fall back on, that experience. So I spent a long time learning ActionScript, which is the programming language for Flash. How to manipulate like Flash, Flash movies in using code. ActionScript was basically like JavaScript, to be fair, at that time. And anyway, so I spent a long time learning something that I don't use now, meaning that whatever I'm using now or whatever I'm reading about now, in many years to come, I will probably be doing something completely different. So it's kind of one of these things where you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You can't, and you take things with a pinch of salt. You know, a lot of new developers, unfortunately, they get this blindsided by so many new tools out there. They get overwhelmed by all the new things, and as soon as someone with influence says you should learn X over Y, that decision has already been made. And a lot of times, unfortunately, not a lot of thought goes into the longevity of these things. And the longevity of these things isn't a long time. So I'm cautiously interested in playing with Flutter at least, but I wouldn't commit to being a complete Flutter developer, because I don't want to spend all of my energy, because essentially that's what you're giving up, energy and time on something that potentially will not be the thing that is as good as it was in a few years' time, or maybe some company has decided to just turn it off. So, yeah, not that I think that'll happen with Flutter, of course, but we are talking about Google here, who has a reputation for just letting products die. But it makes me wonder how much of their decision-making is based on the fact that other big companies such as Microsoft, who own things like GitHub and LinkedIn and other they've got this social network LinkedIn for, where a lot of developers use it. They have the Git repository being GitHub, and that has Electron, right? So they've got a lot of weight. Plus they've got the ability to have the subshell for Linux and Windows. So, and they do, and for their dues, they do a lot of good stuff for open source, but they're still a huge company with their own agenda, and likewise Google is their own company with their agenda. And when they clash, when they're doing the same kind of thing but just a different flavor of it, it gets very interesting to see where they pull and push and tug the web to suit their needs for their products rather than the product of the other companies. And again, that's me putting my tin hat on here, but it's just an interesting sort of it's just an interesting thought experiment, I suppose, as to where this might go in the future. Are we going to be destined to look at Google-based application launchers running in Flutter, or are we going to be more open on with other things? I don't know. Who knows? I'm turning into a Google hater now, aren't I? Anyway, that's me done. I hope everybody's having a great evening. Thank you ever so much for watching. I do promise that I will be putting these out on the podcast. I do promise I will update the podcast this weekend. I know it's been a long time, but I do promise that I'll do that on Saturday, hopefully Saturday, if not Sunday, but I'll let everybody know on Twitter. If you haven't done so already, please do follow me at howtocodewell on Twitter. Obviously, if you are around on Twitch on Sunday, please do join as well. And before I go, I really should mention our new code challenges, our new challenge for this month. So at the end of March the 28th, I'm going to be reviewing the code challenges, and this challenge is all about PHP OOP, so object-oriented programming in PHP. It is a series or a set of 10 questions, kind of like pub quiz questions, I suppose, about OOP, and these questions are sort of like interview-style questions. So do check out codechallenges.howtocodewell.net. I'll put a link in the show notes after this as well. And if you want to join, you don't have to do all the 10 questions. You can do as whatever questions you fancy. And you create your GitHub repository that holds your answers. And then you send a link to our Code Challenges channel on Discord. And I will review it live on Twitch on the 28th of March. So, yeah, that's happening. That's happening. There's 10 questions there about PHP OOP. So thank you ever so much for watching. We have spoken about Flutter, Deno. I've mentioned how to code well. We spoke a little bit about Repl, and of course, how to code well. So thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.